All right, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started here tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about the Symbiosis Project here. Um, we're in the home stretch here, the last unit of Part B of the course, so not too many projects left. But before we do that, just wanted to give you guys some information um, about the lesson as it relates to the project so that way you can have some of the tools that you need to be successful on it. So, first of all, our objectives, which are important. Obviously, through doing the lesson and working through the project, you should be able to understand the study of animal behaviors. You should be able to distinguish ethnologists and comparative behaviorism, and then recognize the different types of learning that you see in organisms as you've gone through this lesson. So when you're talking about behaviors and interdependencies, you'll learn how organisms depend on each other through these behaviors in order to live. So um, one thing to remember about animal behavior is that unlike humans who rationalize and calculate, many other animals, they don't have the same set of morals that we think of, or they don't apply to situations that they're in. So animals in nature behave without any sense of good or evil. Okay, they simply exist and behave to satisfy their physiological needs. Those needs that we talked about at the beginning of the year. Reproduction, digestion, gathering of materials and energy through metabolism, maintaining homeostasis, evolution, and the need to survive. Okay, so they must be secure. They have to be able to avoid predators. And it really boils down to that nature versus nurture, that surviving and continuation of the species. So, um, you have to think of it from that perspective when you're talking about animal behavior. So, with that, um, let's take a few minutes and talk about animal interdependencies, okay? Because that's really what your project is about, okay? So the main types of animal interdependencies that your lesson goes over come down to commensalism, to mutualism, and parasitism, okay? And with commensalism, okay, this is essentially an interdependency that exists in the animal kingdom where one organism benefits and the other isn't harmed, okay? There are many ways whereby organisms can benefit from this type of interdependency in that um, one organism can use another organism as a mode of transportation. So this is a special type of commensalism, okay, called foracy. Um, for example, if you've ever gone to the beach and you've ever been on a boat, you'll see barnacles that attach itself to the wood. Well, barnacles also attach themselves to marine organisms in order to help themselves move around because they can't move on their own. So instead of remaining in one place, the barnacles can attach themselves to the shells or to the skin of other animals, and they get basically a free mode of transportation. Now, with that, the other organism doesn't gain anything, but it doesn't harm the other organism. So it's really it's a commensal type of interdependency. Okay. Another example is the remora fish. It attaches itself to sharks, and the remora gains transportation and protection as it stays on the shark. But the shark isn't harmed, but it is not helped in either case. So that's another example of commensalism. Okay. Um, Commensalism, that true commensalism as we think of it though, is rare. Okay, most biologists would agree that commensal relationships have at least a small effect on one organism or another. In that, despite the fact that the organism might not be affected, it may be helped or it might be harmed very subtly. Okay, so for example, in the barnacle situation, when it attaches itself to an organism like a whale, it adds weight to that organism. Now, we don't know if that extra weight harms the other organisms. However, what we do know is that, an organism with barnacles attached to it may be less of a target for a predator. So that could actually be a benefit for that organism. When you compare that to parasitism, where it's a relationship where two of the organisms exist, and where one actually hurts and the other one helps another organism. So um, parasites are a great example of this, where they can live in the body of a host, and tapeworms are a great example of this. Okay, a tapeworm is basically an endoparasite that lives in the intestines of animals, and it benefits in that it gains blood and it gains energy, used for reproductive processes to perpetuate the species of tapeworms, while the host, in this case the animal, loses weight. It's not able to digest food nearly as effectively, so that organism gets harmed in that case. Okay, and then in mutualism, this is really where both organisms gain some kind of benefit with each other. Okay, um, a great example of mutualism is coral and algae, for example, the dinoflagellates, or bees and flowers. The bees can pollinate the flowers, and in turn, the bees get nourishment from the flowers. So that's an example of mutualism. So with that, let's move over and talk real quickly here about the project. So we talked about the symbiotic interdependencies that exist between organisms. Okay, mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism are really the main types. So your job for this assignment is nothing more than to choose a relationship of the five below, research the relationship that exists, and tell me in a report or a paragraph about what you've learned. Okay, so you're going to include the type of relationship that's represented, and then you're going to talk about how these organisms benefit, how they don't benefit, or how if maybe one benefits and the other one doesn't benefit. So you're going to relate it to the type of symbiosis that exists, and then tell me what happens, in about a 3 to 400 word paragraph. Okay. So, for example, the bees and the flowers, that's obviously a mutualistic relationship. Coral and algae, again, another mutualistic relationship. The remoras and the sharks, that was what we had determined back when we discussed to be a commensalist relationship. Microorganisms in humans' intestines, a great example of parasitism, and ticks and deer, again, another example of parasitism. So your goal is to choose one of those five. Tell me about how those organisms benefit or not benefit from each other, in a short paragraph below, and that's basically the project. So if you have questions or you get stuck, certainly come and see me in the VO. I'll be more than happy to help you, and we'll be back here next week working on another project. So have a great week.